My name is Olivia Richardson. I'm 25 years old, and on what should have been a celebration of my quarter century of existence, I walked into the upscale Italian restaurant where my family had gathered for my birthday dinner, expecting at least the basic human courtesy that strangers show each other, only to have both my parents, Martin and Janet Richardson, explode simultaneously in front of extended family members, screaming, "You're a mistake, we regret," while my cousins laughed like it was the entertainment portion of the evening, and my younger sister Chloe held up her phone to film my public humiliation for her social media followers. What they didn't know was that their cruel declaration would be the final confirmation I needed that people who treat your existence as a regrettable accident don't deserve access to the successful life you build despite their rejection, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to disappear completely from people who never wanted you in the first place, leaving them to face the consequences of losing someone they spent decades convincing was worthless, while discovering that the mistake they regretted was actually the only family member who had been holding their toxic dynamic together through years of trying to earn love that was never available to be given. I had always been the family's unplanned child, a reality that was never kept secret or treated with the kind of gentle discretion that most parents employ when discussing family planning decisions that didn't unfold exactly as intended. From my earliest memories, Martin and Janet made sure I understood that my conception had been an accident that disrupted their carefully orchestrated life plans, interrupted Janet's career trajectory as a marketing executive, and forced them to stretch their financial resources in ways they hadn't anticipated when they were building their ideal family structure around their planned daughter Chloe, who arrived 3 years after me when they were emotionally and financially prepared to welcome a child they actually wanted. The constant reminders of my unwanted status weren't delivered with malicious intent initially, but rather with the casual thoughtlessness of people who had never learned to consider how their words might affect a child's developing sense of self-worth and belonging. "We weren't ready for another baby when you came along," Janet would explain to friends and relatives while I sat nearby, as if I were an inconvenient package that had been delivered to the wrong address. "Your sister was planned, but you were a surprise that changed everything," Martin would add during family gatherings, using the word surprise in the same tone most people reserve for discussing natural disasters or financial setbacks. The differentiation between planned and unplanned became the organizing principle of our family dynamics, creating a hierarchy where Chloe's needs, desires, and achievements were prioritized as investments in their intended child, while my requests for attention, resources, or emotional support were treated as additional burdens imposed by someone who had already cost them more than they had planned to spend on family expansion. This wasn't conscious cruelty, but rather the inevitable result of parents who had never processed their resentment about an unplanned pregnancy and had allowed that resentment to shape their relationship with the child who represented their lost control over family planning and financial management. The practical manifestations of this emotional hierarchy were visible in every aspect of our childhood experiences, from birthday celebrations that ranged from elaborate parties for Chloe to obligatory dinners for me, to college funding that covered Chloe's entire education, while I worked multiple jobs to pay my own way through community college and graphic design certification programs. When Chloe wanted a car for her 16th birthday, Martin and Janet researched options for months before surprising her with a Honda Civic that represented their pride in their planned daughter's achievements and milestones. When I turned 16, they took me to a used car lot and co-signed a loan that required me to work 25 hours per week at a grocery store to make payments on a 10-year-old sedan with over 150,000 miles. The financial disparities weren't presented as favoritism, but rather as logical allocation of limited resources based on each child's situation and needs, with my situation being that I was an unexpected expense and my needs being secondary to the family's primary investment in Chloe's future. "We have to be more careful with money because we have 2 children instead of the one we planned," Janet would explain when I asked why Chloe's requests were approved while mine were denied. As if my existence had created scarcity that required strategic rationing rather than acknowledging that they simply didn't want to spend money on someone they viewed as an accident. But beyond the obvious material differences, the emotional inequity was even more damaging and pervasive, affecting everything from daily interactions to major family decisions about vacations, living arrangements, and future planning. Chloe's opinions were solicited and valued during family discussions, while my input was tolerated politely before being dismissed or ignored. Chloe's achievements were celebrated with enthusiasm and pride, while my accomplishments were acknowledged briefly before conversation shifted to more interesting topics. Chloe's problems were treated as family crises requiring collective solutions, while my difficulties were viewed as personal challenges that I should handle independently without burdening parents who had already sacrificed enough for an unplanned child. The psychological impact of growing up as the unwanted accident in a family that made no effort to hide their resentment was profound and lasting, shaping my understanding of self-worth, relationships, and my place in the world in ways that required years of therapy and personal development work to begin addressing. I learned to anticipate rejection, to minimize my needs, to excel academically and professionally as a way of proving my worth to people who had already decided I was a mistake, and to accept crumbs of affection as sufficient nourishment because I had been conditioned to believe that wanting more was evidence of the selfishness that had characterized my existence from conception. The irony was that my desperate attempts to earn their love through achievement and compliance had actually made me a more interesting, accomplished, and resilient person than Chloe, who had never needed to develop independence, work ethic, or problem-solving skills because her needs were anticipated and met before she experienced discomfort or challenge. By age 25, I had built a successful freelance graphic design business, maintained my own apartment without parental support, traveled internationally through my own earnings, and developed a network of friendships and professional relationships that provided the emotional connection and support that my family had never offered. But despite my obvious success and self-sufficiency, my family continued to treat me as the burdensome accident who should be grateful for whatever minimal attention they provided, while simultaneously expecting me to participate in family gatherings and maintain relationships that consistently reminded me of my unwanted status and inferior position in their emotional hierarchy. Have you ever spent decades trying to earn love from people who made it clear that your existence was an inconvenience they regretted? That's exactly what I experienced every time I walked into a family gathering, hoping that this time might be different, that my achievements might finally warrant the kind of recognition and affection that Chloe received automatically, simply by being the daughter they had actually wanted to create. The birthday dinner that would change everything was scheduled at Angelina's, an upscale Italian restaurant that Janet had chosen because it was Chloe's favorite place, and because the ambiance would provide good lighting for the social media content that Chloe planned to create around the family celebration. The choice of venue wasn't based on my preferences or comfort, but rather on Chloe's content creation needs and Janet's desire to be seen at a restaurant that reflected the family's social status and sophisticated taste in dining experiences. I had arrived at the restaurant with carefully managed expectations, knowing from 25 years of experience that my birthday celebrations were typically brief, obligatory affairs that fulfilled my parents' sense of duty without generating genuine enthusiasm or joy. I wore a new dress that I had purchased specifically for the occasion, hoping that looking polished and put together might contribute to a pleasant evening that could create positive memories, rather than adding to my collection of birthday disappointments and family tension. The early part of the dinner proceeded according to the familiar script of Richardson family gatherings, with conversation focused primarily on Chloe's latest social media successes, her developing relationship with a boyfriend who met with parental approval, and her plans for leveraging her marketing degree into a career that would utilize her natural charisma and digital marketing skills. My contributions to the conversation were acknowledged politely but briefly, with questions about my graphic design work receiving perfunctory responses before attention returned to more interesting topics related to Chloe's life and achievements. Martin spent considerable time discussing Chloe's job prospects and offering to leverage his business connections to help her secure interviews with companies that might appreciate her social media expertise and marketing education. Chloe has exactly the kind of personality and skills that modern companies need, Martin explained to the table, his voice filled with pride and enthusiasm. She understands digital marketing in ways that older employees don't, and she has the confidence to present ideas and build relationships with clients who respond to authentic communication. The praise for Chloe's potential was followed by polite inquiries about my own business development, but the questions felt perfunctory and were quickly abandoned when I began explaining recent client projects and expansion opportunities that I had been developing through networking and professional referrals. "That's nice, honey," Janet replied when I mentioned landing a contract with a tech startup that could lead to ongoing branding work. But her attention had already shifted to her phone, where she was reviewing Chloe's latest Instagram posts and suggesting improvements to captions and hashtag strategies. The extended family members who had joined us for dinner included my Aunt Patricia and Uncle David, along with their twin sons Derek and Daniel, who were both college-aged and found family gatherings tedious, unless something interesting happened to break up the routine of adult conversation about careers, relationships, and future planning. The cousins had been scrolling through their phones for most of the meal, occasionally looking up to make sarcastic comments about family dynamics or to encourage drama that might provide entertainment value during an otherwise boring dinner obligation. "When are we doing cake?" Derek asked during a lull in conversation, apparently viewing the birthday celebration as a series of activities to be completed, rather than a meaningful ritual to honor someone's existence and achievements. "I have plans later, so if we're going to do the whole birthday song thing, we should probably get it over with." The casual dismissal of my birthday as something to get over with was typical of how family events focused on me were treated as obligations to be endured rather than celebrations to be enjoyed. But I had become accustomed to managing my expectations and finding satisfaction in small moments of civility, rather than hoping for genuine enthusiasm or affection. But what happened next was unlike anything I had experienced during previous family gatherings, as my parents' carefully maintained facade of polite tolerance suddenly shattered in a way that revealed the depth of their resentment and the extent to which they had been suppressing their true feelings about my existence for the past quarter-century. The trigger for their explosion was apparently my mention of considering a move to Portland, where several of my clients were based, and where the creative community offered opportunities for collaboration and business development that weren't available in our current city. I had brought up the possibility casually, as part of discussing future plans and professional goals, without any expectation that the topic would generate strong reactions or family conflict. "Portland has a really vibrant design scene," I had said, "and I've been thinking about relocating to be closer to some of my best clients and to tap into the collaborative opportunities that exist when you're part of a creative community rather than working in isolation." The response from Martin was immediate and disproportionately angry, as if my mention of potentially moving had triggered years of suppressed frustration and resentment that he could no longer contain behind polite family dynamics. "Of course you want to move away," Martin said, his voice rising in volume and intensity, "because you've never cared about this family or appreciated anything we've done for you." The accusation was both unfair and revealing, since I had been the family member who consistently attended gatherings, remembered birthdays and holidays, and made efforts to maintain relationships despite receiving minimal emotional support or recognition in return. But Martin's anger seemed to be building on itself, fed by grievances and resentments that had apparently been accumulating for years without being expressed directly. "You've been nothing but problems since the day you were born," Martin continued, his voice becoming louder and more aggressive. "And now you want to abandon the family that has supported you for 25 years because you think you're too good for us." Janet joined the attack with her own accusations and revelations about how my existence had affected their lives and future plans, speaking with the kind of venom that suggested these were thoughts and feelings she had been harboring for decades without expressing them openly. "You're a mistake we regret," Janet declared, her voice carrying clearly across the restaurant and drawing attention from other diners who were witnessing this public family destruction. "We never wanted another child, and your birth ruined everything we had planned for our future. We should have made different choices." The words hit me like physical blows, not because they revealed information I didn't already know, but because they represented the first time my parents had stated their resentment so directly and publicly, transforming years of subtle rejection into an explicit declaration that my existence was unwanted and regrettable. But what made the moment even more devastating was the reaction of our extended family members, who treated my parents' cruel declarations as entertainment rather than recognizing the abuse they were witnessing. Derek and Daniel began laughing and encouraging Martin to continue his attack, while Patricia and David sat silently watching the drama unfold without any attempt to intervene or defend me from this public humiliation. "Tell us how you really feel, Uncle Martin," Derek said, pulling out his phone to record the confrontation. "This is better than reality TV." Meanwhile, Chloe had positioned herself to capture the entire scene from multiple angles, filming my parents' abuse and my reaction for content that she could edit and share across her social media platforms, as an example of family drama that would generate engagement and entertainment value for her followers. "This is incredible content," Chloe whispered to herself while adjusting her phone's camera angle. "My followers love family drama, and this is authentic reaction footage that you can't fake." The realization that my own birthday celebration had become a performance for social media consumption, with my humiliation serving as content for Chloe's online brand, was perhaps even more devastating than my parents' declaration that they regretted my existence, because it revealed that even my pain was viewed as a resource to be exploited rather than a human experience deserving of empathy and protection. Have you ever realized that your family views your suffering as entertainment to be filmed and shared, rather than as pain that deserves compassion and support? That's exactly what I experienced as I sat in that restaurant, watching people who claim to love me treat my public humiliation as amusing content, rather than recognizing the cruelty they were witnessing and enabling. The continuation of Martin and Janet's attack revealed the extent of their resentment and the depth of their regret about decisions they had made 25 years earlier, as they began listing specific ways that my existence had negatively impacted their lives, their marriage, their finances, and their ability to provide the kind of focused attention and resources that they wanted to give to their planned daughter. "You cost us a fortune in medical bills when you were born because of complications that wouldn't have happened if you had been planned and properly prepared for," Martin said, his voice filled with anger that seemed to be building rather than diminishing as he finally expressed decades of suppressed resentment. "And then you required extra attention and resources throughout childhood because you were always trying to compete with Chloe for affection that you hadn't earned." The accusation that I hadn't earned affection from my own parents was particularly cruel and revealing about their fundamental misunderstanding of parental responsibility and the unconditional love that children deserve, regardless of whether their conception was planned or accidental. But Martin wasn't finished listing his grievances and resentments about the impact my existence had created for their family planning and financial management. "We could have given Chloe so much more if we hadn't been forced to divide our resources between two children," Martin continued. "And your constant need for attention and validation made it impossible for us to focus on raising the daughter we actually wanted to have." Janet added her own catalog of complaints and regrets, focusing on the ways that my unplanned arrival had disrupted her career trajectory and forced her to make sacrifices that she had never agreed to make when she was planning her ideal family structure. "I had to take extended maternity leave that set back my promotion timeline," Janet said, "and I never recovered the career momentum that I lost because of an unplanned pregnancy that forced me to reorganize my entire professional development strategy." The focus on career disruption revealed that Janet viewed my existence primarily through the lens of professional inconvenience, rather than recognizing that parenthood involves sacrifices and adjustments regardless of whether conception is planned or accidental, and that successful parenting requires adapting to children's needs rather than resenting them for existing. But the most devastating aspect of their attack wasn't the specific grievances they were listing, but rather the public nature of their abuse and the way our extended family members were responding to their cruelty with laughter, encouragement, and entertainment, rather than recognizing the psychological damage they were inflicting on someone who had already spent 25 years trying to earn love that was apparently never available to be given. "Keep going. This is amazing," Daniel said while recording the confrontation on his phone. "Uncle Martin is finally telling the truth about family planning and birth control failures." The characterization of my existence as a birth control failure was the kind of dehumanizing language that revealed how completely our family had internalized the narrative that some children are mistakes who deserve less love, respect, and consideration than children who were conceived intentionally by parents who were emotionally and financially prepared for parenthood. Patricia and David continued to sit silently while their sons recorded and encouraged the abuse, apparently viewing the destruction of my sense of self-worth as acceptable entertainment that didn't warrant intervention or protection from adults who should have recognized the cruelty they were witnessing and taken action to stop it. But Chloe's behavior was perhaps the most hurtful, as she continued filming while occasionally directing the scene to capture better angles or encourage more dramatic declarations that would create compelling content for her social media audience. "Mom, can you repeat that part about the medical bills?" Chloe asked. "I think my followers would find it interesting to hear about the real costs of unplanned pregnancies that parents don't usually discuss publicly." The request for my mother to repeat her cruel accusations so they could be captured more clearly for social media consumption was the moment when I fully understood that my family viewed me not as a person deserving of love and respect, but as a source of drama and content that could be exploited for entertainment and online engagement. As I sat there listening to my parents list their regrets about my existence while my sister filmed my humiliation and my cousins laughed at my pain, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my life forever. I was done trying to earn love from people who had never wanted to give it, and I was ready to remove myself completely from a toxic dynamic that had consumed 25 years of my life without providing any meaningful connection or genuine family relationship. The decision to leave wasn't made in anger or as a dramatic gesture designed to provoke guilt or remorse from family members who had just demonstrated their complete lack of empathy and respect for my emotional well-being. Instead, it was a calm, strategic choice based on the recognition that I had spent my entire adult life trying to create relationships with people who viewed my existence as a regrettable mistake, and that the healthiest response to their public declaration of resentment was to give them exactly what they claimed they wanted: my absence from their lives. The clarity that came with understanding my family's true feelings was both devastating and liberating, as it eliminated years of confusion about why I never felt truly accepted or loved, despite my achievements, compliance, and consistent efforts to maintain positive relationships with people who had never wanted me to exist in the first place. I didn't argue with their accusations or attempt to defend my right to exist and be treated with basic human dignity, because I finally understood that their rejection wasn't based on anything I had done or failed to do, but rather on their fundamental resentment about an unplanned pregnancy that they had never processed or accepted in healthy ways. Instead of engaging with their abuse or trying to convince them that I deserved better treatment, I simply reached across the table and blew out the single candle that had been placed in front of me on a small piece of cake that represented the obligatory acknowledgement of my birthday, rather than any genuine celebration of my life or achievements. "Thank you for finally being honest about how you feel," I said quietly, standing up from the table and reaching for my coat. "It's actually a relief to know that I can stop trying to earn something that was never available to be given." The calmness in my voice and the absence of drama or emotional reaction seemed to confuse my family members, who had apparently expected me to become defensive, angry, or desperate in response to their public attack on my existence and worth as a human being. "Where are you going?" Janet asked, her voice containing the first hint of uncertainty and concern that she had shown all evening. "We're not finished with dinner, and we haven't even discussed your birthday plans for the rest of the weekend." Oh, the suggestion that there were birthday plans beyond this dinner was almost laughable, given that my parents had just spent the past 20 minutes explaining why they regretted my birth and listing the ways my existence had negatively impacted their lives and family planning. "I think we're very finished," I replied, putting on my coat and gathering my purse while my family members sat in stunned silence, apparently beginning to realize that their public abuse had triggered a response they hadn't anticipated. "And I don't think there will be any more birthday celebrations or family gatherings in my future." The finality in my voice seemed to penetrate their shock, and I could see the beginning of panic in Janet's eyes as she realized that I was serious about leaving, and that their cruel behavior might have consequences that extended beyond the momentary satisfaction they had gained from finally expressing their resentment openly. "Olivia, sit down," Martin said, his voice losing its angry edge and taking on a tone of authority that he had always used when trying to control family situations. "You're being dramatic and overreacting to honest family conversation about difficult topics." But the characterization of their public abuse as honest family conversation only confirmed that they still didn't understand the magnitude of their cruelty or the appropriateness of my response to being told by my own parents that they regretted my existence and viewed my birth as a mistake that had ruined their plans. "I'm not being dramatic," I replied. "I'm being logical. You've just told me that you never wanted me and that you regret my existence. So the logical response is to give you what you want, a life without the mistake you've been forced to tolerate for 25 years. As I walked toward the restaurant exit, I could hear the beginning of family chaos behind me, with urgent whispered conversations and the sound of chairs being pushed back, as some family members apparently realized that the evening had taken a turn they hadn't expected, and that their entertainment had potentially created lasting consequences. But I didn't turn around to witness their reaction, or to provide them with the dramatic exit scene that they might have expected. Instead, I walked calmly out of the restaurant and drove home to my apartment, where I began the practical process of removing myself from their lives completely and permanently. The systematic elimination of my family from my life began immediately, and was conducted with the same methodical planning and attention to detail that I had used to build my graphic design business and create financial independence, despite receiving no family support or encouragement. I started by blocking every family member's phone number, social media accounts, and email addresses, ensuring that they would have no way to contact me directly or monitor my activities through digital platforms. The blocking process was more extensive than I had initially realized, as it included not just immediate family members, but also extended relatives who had participated in or witnessed my public humiliation without intervening on my behalf, revealing that the toxicity extended beyond my parents and sister to include a broader network of people who viewed my suffering as entertainment, rather than recognizing it as abuse that deserved protection and support. Next, I began the process of packing my belongings and making arrangements to leave the city where I had grown up, and where every location held memories of family rejection and failed attempts to earn love that was never available to be given. The decision to relocate wasn't just about physical distance, but about creating psychological space that would allow me to build new relationships and develop a sense of self-worth that wasn't constantly undermined by people who viewed my existence as a regrettable mistake. The packing process was surprisingly easy, as I realized that most of my possessions were things I had purchased for myself, rather than gifts or family heirlooms that connected me to people who had never valued my presence in their lives. The absence of meaningful family connections meant that I could start fresh without losing important mementos or symbols of relationships that had provided genuine love and support. I spent the night researching cities that offered opportunities for graphic designers, while also providing distance from family members who might attempt to track down my location if they decided that my disappearance was inconvenient for their family dynamic or social media content creation. Portland emerged as the ideal destination, offering both professional opportunities and geographic distance, while also providing the creative community that I had mentioned during dinner as a factor in my potential relocation plans. By morning, I had arranged temporary housing in Portland, transferred my business operations to accommodate remote client work, and begun the process of closing local accounts and relationships that connected me to my current location and family situation. The efficiency of my departure planning reflected years of subconscious preparation for the possibility that I might need to escape my family's toxicity if it ever became unbearable. The final step in my disappearance was composing a brief letter that I left on my apartment door for the landlord, explaining that I was terminating my lease early and providing contact information for handling any remaining business related to the property. I didn't leave forwarding addresses or contact information that might allow family members to track my location if they decided to pursue me after realizing that I had actually followed through on my promise to remove myself from their lives. As I drove out of the city where I had spent 25 years trying to earn love from people who never wanted to give it, I felt a sense of freedom and possibility that I had never experienced before, as if a weight that I had been carrying my entire life had suddenly been lifted and I could finally breathe properly for the first time. The road to Portland represented more than just a physical journey. It was the beginning of a psychological transformation that would allow me to discover who I could become when I wasn't constantly trying to prove my worth to people who had decided before my birth that I was unwanted and regrettable. Have you ever realized that the people you've been trying to please for your entire life are the exact people you need to escape in order to discover your own value and potential? That's exactly what I experienced as I drove toward a new life. Leaving behind people who had treated my existence as a burden rather than recognizing the gift of having someone who had loved them unconditionally, despite receiving only rejection and criticism in return. The first morning in Portland brought a sense of peace and possibility that I hadn't experienced since childhood. As I woke up in a temporary furnished apartment without the familiar anxiety of wondering what criticism or disappointment awaited me from family members who had trained me to expect rejection as the default state of our relationships. The absence of their negativity created space for me to remember who I was beneath years of defensive behaviors and self-doubt that had developed in response to constant emotional invalidation. But the peace was interrupted by the discovery that my phone, despite being blocked, was filled with missed calls and voicemail messages from family members who had apparently spent the night trying to contact me and were beginning to panic about my complete disappearance from their lives. The blocked settings meant that the calls hadn't disturbed my sleep, but the notification count revealed the extent of their attempts to reach me and suggested that my absence was creating exactly the kind of crisis and inconvenience that they had accused me of causing throughout my life. The voicemail from Janet was particularly revealing, as her voice progressed from angry demands that I stop being dramatic and return home immediately, to confused pleading as she apparently began to understand that I was serious about removing myself from their lives permanently. "Olivia, this is ridiculous," Janet's first message began. "You need to come home right now and stop acting like a child who didn't get her way. We were just being honest about family dynamics, and you're overreacting to normal family conversation." But her subsequent messages revealed growing desperation as she realized that I wasn't responding to her calls and that my disappearance might be more serious than the temporary tantrum she had initially assumed it to be. "Please call me back," Janet's final message said, her voice containing genuine fear for the first time in my memory. "We need to talk about what happened last night and figure out how to move forward as a family." The irony of Janet's sudden desire to move forward as a family after spending decades making it clear that I wasn't a valued member of their family structure wasn't lost on me, but it also revealed that my absence was creating exactly the kind of disruption and inconvenience that my presence had apparently caused for 25 years. Martin's voicemail messages followed a similar pattern, beginning with angry demands for my immediate return and escalating to what sounded like genuine panic as he realized that I had actually followed through on my promise to remove myself from their lives. "This is Martin," his final message said. "Please, just talk to us. We can work this out." The brevity and desperation in Martin's voice was striking, especially compared to his lengthy, detailed attack on my existence during the previous evening's dinner. Apparently, listing grievances about my unwanted birth was easier than facing the possibility that I might actually grant his wish to live without the burden of my presence. Chloe's messages were different in tone but equally revealing about how my disappearance was affecting the family dynamic and her social media content creation strategy. "Olivia, where are you?" Chloe's first message demanded. "I need to know what happened after you left the restaurant because my followers are asking for updates, and I don't know how to end the story without knowing where you went." Doc, the focus on social media storytelling rather than concern for my well-being confirmed that Chloe viewed my pain primarily as content for her online brand rather than as a genuine family crisis that required empathy and resolution. But Chloe's subsequent messages revealed that my disappearance was creating problems for her social media strategy that extended beyond just completing a story arc for her followers. "People are commenting that the family looked really cruel in the videos," Chloe admitted in her final message. And some of my followers are saying that they're going to unfollow me because they don't want to support someone who films family abuse for entertainment. The revelation that Chloe's social media audience was criticizing her for filming and sharing my humiliation provided unexpected validation that normal people recognized the cruelty I had experienced and weren't entertained by watching family members abuse someone during what should have been a birthday celebration. The most surprising messages came from extended family members who had laughed and encouraged the abuse during dinner, but were now apparently concerned about the potential consequences of their behavior being documented and possibly shared more widely. "Olivia, this is Derek," one message said. "I want you to know that I didn't mean anything bad by recording what happened last night. It was just funny in the moment, but I deleted the videos and I won't share them anywhere. Please don't do anything crazy that might get the family in trouble." The concern about getting the family in trouble suggested that Derek was beginning to understand that publicly abusing someone during their birthday celebration might have legal or social consequences that extended beyond the entertainment value he had found in my humiliation. Patricia left a similar message expressing concern about the potential ramifications of their behavior being exposed more broadly. "We need to discuss what happened last night and make sure that everyone understands it was just family drama that got out of hand. Please call me so we can figure out how to handle this situation appropriately." The characterization of my public abuse as family drama that got out of hand revealed that Patricia still didn't understand the magnitude of their cruelty or the appropriateness of my response to being told by my own parents that they regretted my existence and viewed my birth as a mistake that had ruined their family planning. But the most telling aspect of all these messages was what they didn't contain: genuine apologies for their behavior, recognition of the pain they had caused, or acknowledgement that their treatment of me had been inappropriate and cruel. Instead, their communications focused on damage control, social media management, and getting me to return so that family dynamics could resume their normal pattern without the inconvenience of my absence. The absence of genuine remorse or recognition of wrongdoing confirmed that my decision to remove myself from their lives had been appropriate and necessary, since people who could publicly abuse someone during their birthday celebration and then focus primarily on managing the consequences rather than addressing their behavior were unlikely to change their fundamental attitudes or treatment patterns. Over the following weeks, as I established my new life in Portland and began building relationships with people who valued kindness, creativity, and mutual respect, I received periodic updates about my family's ongoing attempts to locate me and convince me to return to their toxic dynamic. A private investigator contacted my former landlord asking for forwarding information, but the lack of forwarding address meant that this avenue of investigation was unsuccessful. Former co-workers received inquiries about my whereabouts, but my professional relationships had always been separate from my family connections, so these contacts yielded no useful information for tracking my location. The most disturbing development was learning that Chloe had posted edited versions of the restaurant footage on her social media accounts, attempting to frame the incident as a family miscommunication that had been blown out of proportion by someone who was too sensitive to handle honest family feedback. But Chloe's attempt to control the narrative backfired when her followers began sharing the videos more widely, attracting attention from people who recognized the incident as family abuse rather than accepting her characterization of it as normal family dynamics or communication issues. "This is horrific," one viral response read. "Imagine filming your sister being told she was a mistake by your parents on her birthday and then posting it online for entertainment. This family is toxic." The broader social media response validated my understanding of the situation and provided external confirmation that my family's behavior had been genuinely abusive rather than normal family conflict that I had misinterpreted due to oversensitivity or dramatic tendencies. Mental health professionals began commenting on the videos, explaining the psychological damage caused by telling children they were unwanted accidents, and highlighting the long-term effects of this kind of emotional abuse on self-worth, relationship capacity, and mental health outcomes. Children who are repeatedly told they were mistakes develop complex trauma responses, one licensed therapist explained in a response video that received thousands of views. And the public nature of this abuse makes it even more damaging because it shows that the family views the child's pain as entertainment, rather than recognizing it as harm that requires protection and healing. The professional validation of my experience and the growing social media awareness about family emotional abuse created consequences for my family that they had never anticipated when they decided to publicly humiliate me during my birthday celebration. Meanwhile, I was discovering what life felt like when surrounded by people who celebrated my existence, rather than treating it as a regrettable mistake that required tolerance and management. The creative community in Portland welcomed me with the kind of genuine warmth and appreciation that I had never experienced from my biological family, as fellow designers, artists, and creative professionals recognized my talent, valued my contributions to collaborative projects, and included me in social activities because they enjoyed my company rather than feeling obligated to tolerate my presence. "Your portfolio is incredible," said Marcus Chen, a senior designer at a branding agency who became both a professional mentor and genuine friend. "And your approach to client collaboration shows the kind of emotional intelligence that makes great designers truly exceptional. We're lucky to have you in the Portland creative community." The recognition of my professional abilities was accompanied by personal acceptance that felt revolutionary after 25 years of trying to earn basic acknowledgement from people who had decided before my birth that I wasn't worthy of love or respect. My new friend group included other transplants who had relocated to escape toxic family situations, and our shared experiences of family rejection created bonds that were deeper and more supportive than any relationships I had maintained with biological relatives who shared my DNA but not my values or emotional capacity. "Sometimes the family that chooses you is more important than the family you're born into," observed Sarah Williams, a freelance photographer who had also relocated to escape family dysfunction. "And it sounds like you've found people who actually deserve the love and loyalty you've been wasting on people who never appreciated what they had." The concept of chosen family was new to me, but it represented exactly what I was building in Portland: relationships based on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine affection, rather than biological connections that came with obligations, but no corresponding emotional support or recognition. 6 months after my disappearance, I received a letter forwarded through a complex chain of professional contacts that my family had apparently used to bypass my communication blocks and attempt one final effort to convince me to resume contact and return to their family dynamic. The letter was written by Janet and represented her most comprehensive attempt to acknowledge the impact of their behavior, while simultaneously minimizing its significance and requesting that I forgive their mistakes and return to normal family relationships. "We realize that we said some hurtful things during your birthday dinner," Janet wrote, "and we want you to know that we didn't mean to sound like we didn't love you or want you in our lives. Family relationships are complicated, and sometimes people say things they don't mean when emotions are running high. The characterization of their coordinated public attack as hurtful things said during high emotions revealed that Janet still didn't understand the magnitude of their abuse or the appropriateness of my response to being told by my parents that they regretted my existence and viewed my birth as a mistake. "We miss you and want you to come home so we can work through this misunderstanding and get back to being a family," the letter continued. "Chloe has been very upset about the negative social media attention, and we think it would be good for everyone if we could resolve this privately and move forward together." The focus on Chloe's upset about social media consequences, rather than recognition of the pain their abuse had caused me, confirmed that their primary concern was managing the fallout from their behavior, rather than addressing the underlying attitudes and patterns that had created the situation. But the most revealing part of the letter was its conclusion, which attempted to minimize the significance of my absence while simultaneously acknowledging its impact on their family dynamic. "We know you're probably enjoying your independence in Portland," Janet wrote, "but we hope you'll realize that family is the most important thing in life, and that whatever happened between us isn't worth destroying our relationships permanently." The suggestion that I was enjoying independence rather than recovering from decades of emotional abuse revealed that Janet viewed my absence as a temporary rebellion rather than understanding it as a necessary escape from toxic relationships that had never provided genuine love or support. My response to Janet's letter was brief and definitive, designed to communicate clearly that I had no interest in resuming relationships with people who viewed my existence as a regrettable mistake, while simultaneously expecting me to prioritize their needs and comfort over my own well-being and healing. "Dear family," I wrote, "thank you for your letter. Mistake is busy building a life with people who celebrate her existence rather than treating it as something to regret. Please don't contact me again." The signature "mistake" was both an acknowledgement of their characterization of my existence and a reclamation of their cruelest label as a source of strength rather than shame, representing my transformation from someone who spent decades trying to earn love from people who never wanted to give it to someone who had found genuine acceptance and appreciation from chosen family who valued my contributions to their lives. The final chapter of my relationship with the Richardson family came 2 years later, when I learned through mutual professional contacts that Martin and Janet had been using my success and relocation as talking points in their social circles, claiming credit for raising an independent daughter who had found success on her own, while conveniently omitting their role in driving me away through decades of emotional abuse and public humiliation. "They're telling people that they're proud of how self-sufficient you became," reported a former colleague who had encountered my parents at a business networking event. "And they're acting like your success in Portland validates their parenting choices rather than acknowledging that you succeeded despite their treatment, not because of it." The attempt to claim credit for achievements they had never supported while rewriting the history of our relationships, to present themselves as proud parents, rather than people who had publicly declared their regret about my existence, was both predictable and irrelevant, since their approval or recognition was no longer something I needed or valued. Chloe had apparently struggled more significantly with the consequences of her social media strategy, as her followers continued to associate her brand with family abuse and cruelty rather than the lifestyle content she preferred to create and share. Her engagement rates never recovered, reported a mutual contact from college, and several brand partnerships ended after the birthday video went viral, and companies didn't want to be associated with someone who films family members being abused for entertainment. The professional consequences for Chloe's career were appropriate results of her decision to prioritize social media content over family loyalty and human decency, though I took no satisfaction in her struggles since my focus had shifted entirely to building positive relationships and creative success rather than monitoring the fallout from my family's dysfunction. The life I built in Portland exceeded every dream I had entertained during my years of trying to earn love from people who never wanted to give it, featuring professional success that recognized my creative talents, friendships that celebrated my personality and achievements, and romantic relationships that were based on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than obligation or convenience. "You're the most resilient person I know," my partner David told me during our second anniversary celebration. "And I can't imagine having the strength to walk away from your entire family and build a completely new life based on your own values and goals." The recognition of my resilience was meaningful because it came from someone who had chosen to love me after learning my complete history, including the family rejection and emotional abuse that had shaped my early development, rather than someone who felt obligated to tolerate my presence due to biological connections. The chosen family I created in Portland became the foundation for understanding what healthy relationships looked like when built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine appreciation rather than genetic connections that came with expectations, but no corresponding emotional support or recognition. "The best revenge against people who call you a mistake," observed my friend and business partner Elena during one of our regular creative collaboration sessions, "is building a life so beautiful and successful that their rejection becomes irrelevant, rather than something you need to overcome or prove wrong." The wisdom in Elena's observation captured exactly what I had discovered through my journey from unwanted accident to valued community member. True healing didn't come from changing my family's minds about my worth, but from finding people who recognized my value without needing convincing or evidence. If you're reading this and you're still trying to earn love from people who treat your existence as a regrettable mistake, please know that there are communities of people who will celebrate your achievements, value your contributions, and appreciate your presence without requiring you to prove your worth through accomplishments or compliance. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to stop trying to fix relationships with people who have never been willing to love you unconditionally, and to redirect that energy toward building connections with chosen family who recognize your inherent value and celebrate your existence, rather than treating it as something to tolerate or regret. People who call your existence a regrettable mistake don't deserve access to the beautiful life you create despite their rejection. And sometimes the most powerful response to decades of emotional abuse is simply removing yourself from toxic dynamics and building something better with people who actually want you in their lives. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between trying to earn love from people who never wanted to give it and building new relationships with people who celebrated your existence? How did you handle family members who treated your birth as a mistake, while expecting you to prioritize their needs over your own well-being? Your story might help someone else who's struggling with family rejection and needs to understand that chosen family can provide the love and acceptance that biological family sometimes refuses to offer. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that your existence is a gift to be celebrated, not a mistake to be regretted, and that the people who truly deserve your love are those who recognize your value without requiring proof or persuasion. See you in our next story here on Her Sweet Revenge.